Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point where he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. In a world that often feels saturated with illusions and half-truths, there is perhaps no greater deception than the lies we tell ourselves. We fabricate narratives about who we are, what we want, and what we deserve. These are not the harmless fantasies we use to escape a dull moment or to daydream about a better future. These are insidious lies that bury themselves deep into our psyche, making us believe we're satisfied when we're actually discontent, that we're okay when we're really crumbling, and that our choices align with our deepest desires when they don't. The problem is, we get so good at deceiving ourselves that we no longer realize we're doing it. The more we lie, the more tangled our inner world becomes, until we find ourselves trapped in a maze we've built with our own hands. Lying to yourself is not a small misstep. It's a profound betrayal of your own life. It's like trying to read a map that you've drawn with incorrect directions. You end up lost, frustrated, and even further from where you want to be. Dostoevsky, a writer deeply concerned with the human soul's struggles, recognized this trap long ago. He believed that self-deception was the root of our suffering, because it prevents us from seeing the reality of our own lives. And without seeing reality clearly, how can we ever hope to change it? Think of it like standing in front of a cracked mirror. The reflection you see is distorted, showing you a version of yourself that isn't real. Over time, you become accustomed to this reflection. You start to believe it's accurate. You make decisions based on this image, without realizing that every choice you make is based on a lie. This is what self-deception does. It distorts your self-image and influences your life choices in ways that keep you stuck in patterns that don't serve you. One of the most common lies we tell ourselves is that we are fine when we're not. You might be working a job that drains you, staying in a relationship that no longer brings you joy, or following a path that feels empty and meaningless. But instead of acknowledging your discomfort, you convince yourself that it's okay. You say, "It's not that bad. I should be grateful." But should you? If being grateful is just another way of avoiding the truth that you're unhappy, then it's not gratitude. It's resignation. It's the lie that keeps you stuck, telling you that your suffering is noble or necessary when it's not. This kind of self-deception often stems from fear. We're afraid of what might happen if we confront the truth. If we admit that we're not happy, we might have to make changes that are uncomfortable. We might have to leave behind something familiar and step into the unknown. And that's terrifying. So instead of facing this fear, we choose the lie. We stay where we are, convincing ourselves it's safer, easier, and more reasonable. But what we don't realize is that this choice comes at a cost. It costs us our authenticity and our growth. Carl Jung believed that we cannot change anything unless we accept it. He argued that self-deception is a barrier to self-acceptance. When we lie to ourselves, we refuse to acknowledge parts of who we are, our dissatisfaction, our fears, our desires. We push these parts into the shadows, pretending they don't exist. But what happens when we ignore these parts of ourselves? They don't disappear. Instead, they fester and grow stronger, manifesting as anxiety, frustration, or a deep, unshakable sense of emptiness. The longer we lie, the more powerful these hidden parts become, until they start controlling our behavior without us even realizing it. Consider the person who insists they're happy in their career because it's what they always thought they wanted. They might tell themselves, "I'm successful, I should be happy." But deep down, there's a quiet voice that whispers otherwise. It's the voice of their true self, the part that knows the truth. This person might suppress the voice for years, drowning it out with distractions or convincing themselves they're just ungrateful. But over time, that suppressed truth will manifest. Maybe it shows up as a midlife crisis, a sudden bout of depression, or a feeling of being lost despite achieving all the external markers of success. The lie might have been comfortable for a while, but it becomes a prison. And escaping it requires confronting the very truth they've been avoiding. To deepen this idea, let's look at Plato's allegory of the cave. Plato describes a group of people who have been chained inside a dark cave their entire lives. The only reality they know comes from shadows cast on the wall by objects passing in front of a fire behind them. These prisoners take the shadows to be the real world, because it's all they've ever known. But one day, a prisoner is freed and steps outside the cave, For the first time, he sees the world as it truly is, filled with vibrant colors, light, and depth. The initial experience is overwhelming and painful because it shatters everything he believed to be true. But as he adjusts to the light, he comes to understand the truth, realizing how limited and false his previous beliefs were. In many ways, we are like the prisoners in Plato's cave. The lies we tell ourselves are the shadows on the wall. They are the illusions we cling to because facing the bright light of truth is too painful, too shocking. It forces us to question everything we know, everything we've built our lives upon. But just like the freed prisoner, if we muster the courage to step out of the cave of our self-deception, we can begin to see life for what it truly is, full of possibilities, depth, and meaning. Our self-deceptions are also influenced by societal expectations. From a young age, we're conditioned to conform, to fit into predefined roles. We are told what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, and what paths we should follow. If you think about it, many of the lies we tell ourselves aren't even our own. They're inherited from the culture around us. The lie might sound like, I need to have a high-paying job to be valuable, or I must be in a relationship to be complete. These are powerful narratives, and it's easy to internalize them without questioning whether they align with our true values and desires. Take the story of Sisyphus from Greek mythology as an example. Sisyphus was condemned to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll back down each time he neared the top. It's a story of endless, futile labor. Many of us live like Sisyphus without realizing it. We push the boulder of societal expectations, trying to reach a summit that doesn't exist. We lie to ourselves about the meaning and purpose of this struggle, telling ourselves that once we reach the top, we'll be happy. But the truth is, the summit is an illusion. The boulder will always roll back down, and we'll find ourselves starting over, stuck in an endless cycle of striving and disappointment. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential philosopher, argued that man is condemned to be free. This means that we have the freedom to choose our actions, our beliefs, and our paths in life. But with this freedom comes an immense responsibility, to be honest with ourselves. Sartre believed that many of us live in bad faith, a term he used to describe the act of lying to oneself in order to escape the anxiety that comes with true freedom. We tell ourselves we have no choice but to follow certain paths because the alternative, taking full responsibility for our own lives, is too terrifying. We would rather lie to ourselves and live within the confines of our self-imposed limitations than face the uncomfortable reality of our freedom. So, how do we break free from this cycle of self-deception? The first step is radical honesty. It's a willingness to look in the mirror and see yourself clearly, without the distortions of your lies. It's the courage to admit that you're not okay, that you're dissatisfied, that you want something different. This kind of honesty is not easy. It's painful because it forces you to confront everything you've been running from, but it's the only way to start living a life that feels true and meaningful. We live in a culture that rewards comfort and conformity. We're taught to value stability, to fit in, and to avoid anything that disrupts the status quo. But what if the status quo isn't making you happy? What if it's actually the lie that's ruining your life? When you lie to yourself, you become a prisoner of your own expectations. You might think you're keeping yourself safe, but you're really just locking yourself in a cage. True freedom comes not from avoiding discomfort, but from embracing it. It comes from being willing to shatter the illusions you've built and face the raw, unfiltered truth of your own existence. Consider the story of Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the author of Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl witnessed unimaginable suffering, yet he realized that even in the darkest circumstances, the one thing no one could take away from him was his ability to choose his response. He could lie to himself and say that life was meaningless, or he could find a deeper truth, one that gave his suffering a purpose. He chose the latter, and it was this choice that allowed him to survive and find meaning even in the darkest moments of his life. Frankl's story is a powerful example of how facing the truth, even when it's unbearable, can be the key to survival and growth. It wasn't the external circumstances that defined him. It was his refusal to lie to himself about the nature of his suffering. He realized that while he couldn't control his environment, he could control his inner world. He could confront the raw truth of his experience and find meaning in it instead of succumbing to despair. This idea of confronting the truth, no matter how painful, is central to the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche as well. Nietzsche believed in the concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate. He argued that instead of resisting or lying to ourselves about our reality, we should embrace it fully, even the parts that are uncomfortable or painful. This philosophy isn't about passive acceptance. It's about actively loving your life, flaws and all, and refusing to deceive yourself about what it truly is. It's the opposite of self-deception. It's radical, unapologetic honesty. But why is it so difficult to adopt this mindset? One reason is that self-deception often feels safer than the truth. If we acknowledge the full reality of our dissatisfaction, we might have to make difficult changes, and change is inherently frightening. It requires us to step into the unknown, to confront the parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden. But there's a paradox here. While the truth is often painful at first, it's also liberating. It's the key to real freedom because once you acknowledge the truth, you can start to make choices that are aligned with your authentic self, instead of the false self you've constructed through lies. Consider the case of addiction. People who struggle with addiction often lie to themselves about the severity of their problem. They might say, "I can quit anytime I want," or "It's not affecting my life that badly." These lies are comforting because they allow the person to avoid facing the reality of their addiction. But as long as they continue to lie to themselves, they remain trapped. The first step in any recovery process is admitting the truth, acknowledging that there is a problem and that it has taken control. It's only through this honest confrontation that healing can begin. The same principle applies to all areas of our lives. Whether it's our career, relationships, or personal beliefs, the path to growth and fulfillment starts with telling ourselves the truth. Think about the way we use distractions as a form of self-deception. We immerse ourselves in work, social media, or entertainment, convincing ourselves that we're just relaxing or taking a break. But often, these activities are a way of avoiding uncomfortable truths. If you're constantly busy, you don't have time to sit with your thoughts and realize that you're unhappy. It's easier to scroll through Instagram or binge watch a series than it is to confront the fact that you're not living the life you want. Distractions are like a band-aid on a wound that needs stitches. They might cover up the problem temporarily, but they don't heal it. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." Watts believed that resisting reality or lying to ourselves about it only leads to suffering. To live a full and authentic life, we must be willing to see things as they are, not as we wish they were. This means embracing the impermanence of life, accepting that things will change, and letting go of the illusions that keep us stuck. It's about being fully present in the moment, without the veil of self-deception. Take relationships as another example. Many of us stay in relationships long past their expiration date because we lie to ourselves about why we're still there. We might say, "Things will get better," or "It's not that bad." We tell ourselves these lies because the truth that the relationship is no longer fulfilling feels too painful to confront. We fear the loneliness or uncertainty that might follow if we leave. But by lying to ourselves, we deny both our own needs and the needs of our partner. We prolong the inevitable, causing more pain in the long run. It's only when we're honest with ourselves that we can make the decisions that lead to genuine happiness and connection. In many ways, self-deception is like putting off a difficult conversation with yourself. You know deep down that something needs to be addressed, but you keep postponing it, hoping it will go away on its own. But it never does. The longer you wait, the louder the discomfort grows, until it becomes impossible to ignore. And when that moment comes, it often feels like a crisis. But it's not really a crisis. It's the moment of truth that you've been avoiding. It's the breaking point where the lie can no longer hold up under the weight of reality. The poet Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." It's a reminder that our pain and discomfort, rather than being things to avoid or cover up, are actually opportunities for growth. They are signals that something isn't right, that we need to change direction or confront a truth we've been avoiding. When you stop lying to yourself and face the pain head on, you allow the light of awareness to enter. You open the door to healing, growth, and transformation. But this process is not easy. It requires a level of self-awareness that many of us aren't accustomed to. It requires us to question the narratives we've built our lives around and to admit that we might have been wrong. It takes humility, courage, and a willingness to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or escape from it. This is why mindfulness and meditation can be such powerful tools. They help us develop the capacity to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, to see them for what they really are. When you practice mindfulness, you start to notice the subtle ways you lie to yourself, the little justifications and rationalizations that keep you stuck. And once you see them clearly, you can start to dismantle them. Ultimately, the journey away from self-deception is a journey towards self-acceptance. It's about accepting all parts of yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's about embracing the messy, imperfect reality of your life instead of trying to fit it into some idealized version that doesn't exist. It's about recognizing that your worth is not dependent on how well you conform to societal expectations or how perfectly you achieve your goals. Your worth comes from your authenticity, your willingness to be true to yourself even when it's hard. So if you find yourself feeling stuck, dissatisfied, or lost, ask yourself, what lies am I telling myself? What truths am I avoiding? It's a difficult question, but it's the most important one you can ask. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself is the moment you start living a life that is real, a life that is yours. And that, as Dostoevsky understood, is the foundation of all true happiness and fulfillment. The truth might be uncomfortable, but it's the only thing that can set you free.